All right, if you have your Bibles with you this morning, we'll be in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we're going to start a new series, and as Mark has already said, it's going to be about love. And I think he meant to say he doesn't want to hit the nail on the head, but he said, I don't want to hit the nose on the head. Did anyone else notice that he said that? I wanted to make sure and publicly give him a hard time, because I know he's going to give me a hard time at some other time, so I'm preemptively getting him, all right? When we think about love, what is it that comes to mind when you hear that word? Love. Maybe it's a movie, maybe it's a song. Like, if you had to explain love to someone else, how would you put it into words? Like, if you couldn't look at the dictionary and you had to describe it, how would you describe love? It's a beautiful thing, but it's also a very tricky thing. You know, I love you are three of the most powerful words in the English language, but it's often misunderstood. If you've been coming to Grace for a while, then you know that I love cruises. Yeah, we're actually going to be going on a cruise in 3 weeks. I know you feel sorry for me to have to leave the bad weather that's getting a little better. That's okay. I love cruises. I love University of Tennessee football. I love honey buns, not the glazed ones. I like the ones with the white icing on the top, and all God's people said, that's right. I love those. Oh, yeah. I love my wife as well. I love my children. Right? So love is a weird thing. Like, it can be used to describe very different things, right? Today we're going to start a 3-week series that we're calling this. We're simply calling it Real Love. What is real love? We see love all around us, right? We grow up watching movies about people who fall in love and live happily ever after. They usually say that right after they get married. They never show us, like, the next month, right? They live happily ever after. You turn on the radio and you hear songs about love. We have reality shows that show us what real love is all about, right? I mean, it's all over the place. I think one of the enemy's tactics that you see throughout the scriptures, and you see it at the very beginning, is the enemy likes to take something that God made that is good, and he likes to give a counterfeit version of it. He likes to pervert it in some way, to make it look very similar to what God says it's supposed to be, but make it a little bit different and make it very dangerous. And the truth is that love is no different. This thing of love is very important that we understand what real love is. Because when they came to Jesus and they said, Jesus, what's the most important commandment? There were 613 of them in their law. And which one's the most important? And I think many of you probably remember what he told them. He said, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul. And then he said, to love thy neighbor as thyself. All the law and all the prophets, every other law hangs on that. Listen, if you can love God and love others, you don't need the 10 commandments, right? Because you're not going to covet, you're not going to murder, you're not going to steal, you're not going to do those things, right? So it's important that we understand what real love is. One of the best ways of defining what something is to understand what it is not. And what's interesting is when we come to 1 Corinthians 13, Paul wrote this letter to the church at Corinth. They were all jacked up. They were a messed up church. And if you want to read the first 12 chapters, you won't need Netflix because there's a lot of drama going on in there, right? But when you come to chapter 13, he's explaining to them what love is. But before he tells them what real love is, he starts by telling them what love is not. The first few verses make it very clear what love is not. This may sound like an odd way to begin an explanation of what love is, but the truth is that many people struggle to show love in a meaningful way. Much of what we do really is not love at all, according to these verses. We think that love is shown by saying nice things. Love is shown by helping meet needs, or love is shown by giving of ourselves. But what we're going to see in these early verses is that they're going to teach us it's not that easy. Love is not just in what we say, how we help, and in how we give. It's not that easy. The first thing that we see in these verses is this very simple truth about what love is not. Love is not about what you say. If you kind of go back into the Rolodex of your mind and you think about the first time that you told someone that you loved them, or maybe the first time that you told your spouse that you love them. Those are memorable words, right? And if we were honest, they were probably a little bit awkward. I have friends that love to tell everyone, I love you, bro. I love you, man. Does anyone have someone like that in their life? They shake your hand and say, hey, man, I love you. And I'm like, okay. How many of you guys are that I love you person? You tell everyone I love you. Yeah, there's a few in here. How many of the rest of us are like, that's a little awkward for me, to be honest? I mean, I don't have a problem telling my wife I love them, my kids I love them, and I love you guys too. I'm just not going to tell you, right? There's something that's special about those words. It's something that's awkward for some of us. For many people, that's what love is all about. Love is all about just saying those words, declaring, I love you. But look what he says in verse number 1 of 1 Corinthians 13. He says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, or that's the word that they use for love, and I have not love, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. Paul had just written to them about speaking in tongues. And when they would speak in these tongues, a person would speak in whatever language they spoke in, but it was understood by everyone that was in the crowd, whether they spoke English or Spanish or Greek or Aramaic or whatever it may have been. And he's using what he just talked about in chapter 12 to begin to explain what love is not. He says you can have the language of the angels, right? This angelic ability to speak in a loving way. You can speak in such a way that everyone understands you. The many languages or this angelic voice. And he's basically pointing out that some people can communicate in many languages and have this gift of being very eloquent. But he's basically saying it's not that easy. And I want to say that I'm thankful for that because I don't consider myself eloquent. I spent the early years of my life in Tennessee, and I still use a lot of the words that I learned down there, like I ain't going to do it, I'm fixing to do it, and then it's going to be right? How many of you guys got a little bit of redneck in you, and eloquence would not be used to describe your communication style? Paul says, look, you can speak very highly and very eloquently, but love is not about what you say. My wife is going to be in the second service, so she's not in here, so I can speak freely. When we were first married, how many of you guys would agree that the first few years are a little tough? There's some points in life that are tough, yeah? The rest of you are liars. And it's two people that are becoming one, and we say things that are hurtful, we do things that are hurtful, and my wife would come to me and she would tell me something that I had said or done that we had talked about previously, and I had told her, I'll work on that, and I didn't. And are you guys tracking with me on this? Anyone experienced this? And what inevitably, I would say this phrase so often, I would say, babe, I'm sorry, I'll do better, you know I love you. And the first few times that it came across, it was good. But what I learned very quickly in my relationship with my wife is that love is not about what you say. As a matter of fact, look how he concludes the verse here. He says, you can speak eloquently. You can say, I love you all the times you want in the world. But if you don't have love that's attached to that, then you have become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. What we see here is that when we believe that love is about what we say, it ultimately leads to resentment. If all I'm doing is just saying I love you, but there's no real love that's attached to it, then what it's going to lead to is resentment. When I would read this verse before, when it talks about a sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal, when I think about a tinkle cymbal, I think of something that's small and tink, tink, tink. But in their language, they would use this phrase for when pagan religions would make noises to try to get the attention of their gods. Do you remember when Elijah was trying to call fire down from heaven? And before he did that, the pagans were doing it, and they were making all this noise, and they were crying out. That's the word that's used here. As a matter of fact, it would be similar to taking some pots and pans. How many of you guys have ever been woken up like this before? Hey, time to get up, right? Right? How many of you guys right now are like, stop it, right? If I did that through the whole sermon, how many's driving you crazy already doing that, right? I'm sorry. All right, what you're feeling right now is the same way people feel when all we do is tell them, I love you, I love you, I love you, and we don't show it. It leads to, seriously, you would be some of you might get up and leave if I just kept doing this, right? In the words of my wife, when I kept telling her, babe, I'm sorry, I'll work on it, you know I love you, it leads to resentment. It leads to those words, just stop. I don't want to hear it anymore. I want to see it. Have you guys ever heard that? Don't raise your hand, all right? It leads to resentment. Words are not enough. The second thing that we see is this. Love is not only about what we say, love is also not about how you help. Love is not about how you help. Doesn't it feel good when you know something and you share it with someone in order to try to help them? For a lot of us, that's something that's very motivating. I enjoy that. At our home, we have an old well. It's a hand-dug well, and it runs dry, and it's not good or safe to drink the water, so we go refill jugs. It's a blast. So we go refill jugs at Walmart, and so you got to go back to the back of Walmart, put your jugs in there, and push the button, and just stand there like an idiot, and try not to make eye contact with people, right? And so I'm standing there doing that, and then, as if that's not bad enough, because you got to lug all that stuff in there, then I was going up to the front, and I would wait in line, which a lot of you guys hate the self-checkout lines. How many of you guys hate the self-checkout lines? Like you don't work at Walmart, so you don't want to have to scan your own stuff. I get that. And so I felt like, well, I can't go to the self-checkout line because I got these refills. So I'd have to wait in line, and it's always long, right? Because that's how they get you. And I'm waiting in line forever. And then when you finally get up there, they're like, are those refills? Like, yeah. They're like, okay. And they get this book, and they start flipping through it. And I'm just like, let's go, right? It was taking forever. And one day, I was like, I'm going to see if I can do this through the self-checkout line. I won't have to wait in line. I won't have to figure out if these people know the numbers or not. And I asked at the self-checkout line, and they said, yeah, you can do that. And it cut minutes off of my schedule, right? I was so excited about it. So the next time that I went back there, I'm filling up all my jugs, and this lady comes up behind me, and I'm like, sorry, I got a ton of them. And I said, but do you know this? Did you know that you don't have to wait in line? You can go to the self. And I thought I was just sharing this great information that was going to revolutionize her life. And she was like, duh, like who didn't know that, right? When we have this knowledge and we share it with someone in an attempt to help them, we oftentimes equate that with love. But look what he says in verse number 2. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and I understand all mysteries, and I understand all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, and I don't have charity or love, I am nothing. He's describing someone here that has the gift of prophecy. This is not, the crystal ball looking into it and seeing the future. Someone that has the gift of prophecy is someone that just knows truth and they love to share truth. It's a gift of sharing God's truth without compromise, whether it's speaking truth or reproving wrong. They understand all mysteries. They have all knowledge. They basically have a deep understanding of the Word of God and the truth of God. They have all faith. It's this unique ability to trust God for what He has for them in their lives. Basically, what he's pointing out here is that there are some people who are they understand truth. They have this knowledge, and they're good at sharing it in order to help others. My daughter Emma is with us this weekend down from Chicago, and she will be in the second service as well, and so I can speak freely again of her. But when she was young, she has a little bit of that gift of prophecy, and what I mean by that is she's rude. When she was young, you'd hold her in your lap, and she didn't just do this with us, but she would do it with other extended family and friends and that kind of thing. And they'd be talking to her, and she'd look up at them, and she just wanted to help them, but she'd look up at them and go, "Your breath stinks." Now, she wanted to help them, right? Because you don't want to just walk around with bad breath and, let people think you got halitosis or something like that. She would just, you got bad breath, and just get it out there, right? She had that Bob the Builder mentality. Can we fix it? Yes, we can. Let's just tell the truth to them. That'll fix it, right? That's kind of the way that she approached it. We tell people what they need to hear because we love them, but then we're often surprised that when we tell them the truth, they don't respond. Or we tell them the truth and they get mad. Have you ever done that before? Like trying to help someone and they resist? You can literally have all knowledge on all things, but that alone is still not enough. Knowledge does not make people feel loved. As a matter of fact, when we believe that love is in how we help, it leads to resistance. It leads to them pushing back against us. As a matter of fact, look what it says at the end of verse number 2. He says, if I can do all those things, and if I don't have love, I am nothing. I am nothing. It is a total waste of knowledge, a total waste of time, a total waste of talent. As a matter of fact, the phrase I am nothing is the same phrase that's used over in Matthew 5 where he says, you guys are the salt of the earth as believers. But if the salt loses its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? If it is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under the feet of men. I don't know if you've ever been loved like this before or not. But I can remember I had a dorm supervisor when I was in college that he was gifted at speaking, and he understood truth, and he wanted to share truth with us. And we would have dorm devotions a couple of times a week, and I can remember he found out that we were watching something we shouldn't have been watching or saying something we weren't supposed to be saying. They had a lot of rules. Have you guys ever been to Bible college? Yeah, it's rough. And when I was there, they had all those rules. He found out about it, and at dorm devotions that night, he pulled out the pulpit, also known as an ironing board. He pulled it out, and he put his Bible on top of it, and he commenced to... Have you ever heard the phrase ripping face before? When a preacher gets to going and he's waxing eloquent, he was just getting after it. And he was not speaking the truth in love. He was speaking the truth in whatever you call it whenever you're screaming at people. He's speaking the truth in whatever you call it when you're hitting the ironing board so hard that by the time the sermon was over, the ironing board was no longer usable. By the time he got to the end of his sermon, he was talking like this because he had been screaming at us for 30 minutes. How do you think we responded to that truth that he shared with us that night? I'll just tell you this, revival didn't break out. We resisted that. Because you can have the truth and share the truth in such a way, but if it's not shared with love, it leads to resistance. The sharing words or truth is not enough. The last thing is this, love is not about what you give. I think all of us have seen a movie at some point where someone has saved up a bunch of money to buy a wedding band, I guess not a band, an engagement ring for someone. Have you seen it in the movie? And they've spent all this money, but they haven't been the most loving person. Come on, act like you've seen Hallmark before, all right? They're all the same stories. They give them these lavish gifts, and if there isn't love that's attached to that generosity, what do they do with that ring whenever they get it? They toss it, right? I mean, we've all seen stories where the giving of gifts ends to rejection. But look what it says in verse number 3. We see something similar to this. It says, and though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but if I don't have charity, if I don't have love, it profiteth me nothing. Would you say that it's noble to feed the poor? To give, right? Would you say that it's noble to be willing to die for your faith? That's what he's talking about doing here. Imagine doing these things, taking the time and resources to go and to feed the poor, or taking your time and resources and your physical body to go to another land and risk your life to share the gospel with them, and to do these things and be completely rejected. The truth that we see here is that when we believe that love is in what we give, it leads to rejection. It leads to rejection. As a matter of fact, at the end of verse number 3, he says, if I don't have love, it profits me nothing. There's no advantage. There's no benefit. It doesn't help. I don't know if you've ever been loved like this before, but you see it often with parents. A lot of times with dads. Dads will lavish their children with gifts, but the children really don't want gifts. What they want is love. And we've all seen that. We may not have experienced that, but we've at least seen it before. Words are not enough. The truth is not enough. Gifts are not enough. What is real love? We're going to see what it is in just a minute, but we first see what it is not. It is not what we say. It is not how we help, and it is not how we give. Many of us know this all too well because we've tried to show love to a spouse or a child or a neighbor or a relative, and it led to resentment. It led to resistance, and it led to rejection. And we may have wondered, why? Why are they pushing back when I'm saying nice things and trying to just help, and I'm giving them things? Why are they pushing back so much? I would say that is because we have a fundamental misunderstanding of what love is. We've thought that it's about our words, sharing truth, and our gifts, but these things are not enough. Love is greater than any words. Love is greater than any help or any gifts. Because these verses teach us that without love, I say nothing, I am nothing, and I gain nothing. So, with this uplifting message that I've shared with you today, you may be in a spot where you're like, dude, you're killing me. Like, what am I supposed to do? If it's not about what I say, not about or how I help or how I give, this seems hopeless. Why even try? God led Paul to not only tell us what love is not, but he led him to show us what love is. And I want you to see that in the next two verses. In verses 4 and 5, he says, this is what love does. It suffers long. It's kind. It envies not. It vaunteth not itself. It's not puffed up. It doesn't behave itself unseemly. It seeks not her own. And it's not easily provoked. I wanted to illustrate this for us today, and so I was thinking I need to find the perfect husband. And I was talking to John beforehand about finding someone to be the perfect husband, and he looked at me, he's like, dude, I'm your man. And so, John, why don't you come on up here he didn't say that, but John, come up here if you would, and I'm going to have you hold this sign here, because I want to go through these things. It's important that we know what love is not, but we need to know what love is as well. So I'm going to give John an assignment here, all right? So I'm going to have you hold this, and I'm going to have you write the first thing on here. The first, if that doesn't work, I got a backup for you here, because we're Boy Scout, we're prepared, right? All right. The first thing that it says is charity suffers long. Go ahead and write suffers long. You're going to have to write like 7 of them, so don't write, that's too big. All right, that's okay. He'll make it work. All right, so after you're done with that, just hold it up for everyone to see. Love suffers. Some people, the word they use here is love is patient. But let's be honest, that's a better word. That was funny, all right? Come on now, guys. Because when someone's being difficult, you can say, I'm going to be patient. You can be more honest and say, you're going to suffer. Because that's what it takes sometimes. When you're loving someone, it's hard. How many will raise your hand? Don't raise it too high, enthusiastically or anything. But you'd say, love is suffering sometimes. It suffers long. Love is slow in getting angry. Love never tires of waiting. The next thing that we see here, John's going to write down for us, is love is kind. Love is kind, and we're not talking about the energy bar, all right? Love is kind. It means that it's quick to help. Love is eager to reach out when you're in need. The reason they do this is not because they have to, it's because they want to. Love takes pleasure in blessing others. The next one is envies not. Love envieth not. Another way of saying that is love is not jealous. Jealousy is when you think other people have too much and you have too little. Right? You're constantly comparing what they have to what you have. But love doesn't have rivalry. Love is not a competition. Love is happy when other people are happy. They rejoice when other people rejoice. The next one that we see here is love vaunteth not. That's a big word. You can just say love doesn't brag if you want to. I'm not sure if you know how to spell vaunteth. It's behind you if you want to. Love doesn't brag or boast. Jealousy is a desire for what another person has. This one here is a desire for when you want others to see what you have. It's puffed up. It's drawing attention to yourself. Love doesn't need to impress others. The next one is not puffed up. Not puffed up. This is very similar to the last one, but not so much about bragging as much as it is about pride. Bragging is outward pride, whereas this here, not being puffed up, is more inward pride. It's an inflated view of ourselves. Not only that, the last 3 is it doesn't behave itself unseemly. Unseemly not, right? Behaving unseemly means to be rude. It means to be unsuitable or unfit. Paul calls this love. We could say that it's similar to just being courteous to others. It considers the needs of other people. It acts politely. This is not just doing your own thing. It's taking into consideration others. The next one is it seeks not her own. Seeks not her own. Love doesn't put self before others. Love does not demand their way. Love doesn't worry about who gets the credit. It doesn't seek her own. It seeks to bless others. The last one is very similar to the first one, and that is this: it's not easily provoked. Not easily provoked. Just not easily irritated. This one might be hitting a little too close to home for some of us, right? But love is not easily irritated. Love is not quick-tempered. And so John's going to show those 3 pages to us again, and I want you to look through those as he kind of flips through them. And I know we've kind of flew through these very quickly, but I think it's really important for us to understand what love is. Now, let's just be honest. As we look at these things that are listed on this paper, I don't know about you, but the whole love is not thing kind of left me feeling hopeless. But you look at these things, this almost feels impossible. To say that I always am willing to suffer and be patient. I'm always kind. I don't envy. I don't vaunt myself. I'm not puffed up. All those other things. It almost seems impossible. And I would agree with you, because the truth is, it's not that easy. Love is not that easy. And here's the important truth that we cannot miss this morning from this passage. If you miss this truth, you've missed it all. You and I cannot do these things on our own. You and I cannot do these things on our own. They require divine enablement. These things do not describe John Tharp. And Allison said, oh, she's not in here. She can't say amen. No, these things do not describe the perfect spouse. What do these things, who do they describe? They describe the Lord Jesus Christ. These things are a description of everything that Jesus Christ is. The Bible tells us that God is love. God is love. The only way for us to love like this is to allow Him to produce it in us. Love will not be learned in a 3-week series on real love. It will not be learned in a 35-minute sermon on love. Love requires the supernatural work of the one who is love. Because you and I will never show love until we know love. Just as salvation is impossible in our own power, right? We cannot save ourselves. We know that we're broken. We know there's something that needs to be fixed. I know I need to be forgiven. The only way that can happen is by putting my faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ, that He died for me, that He was buried, and He rose again. And the same thing is true when it comes to learning to love in the way that God has called us to love in 1 Corinthians 13. Because the truth is this: Jesus is not only the example of love, He is the empowerment of love. It is only through Jesus that I can have the power to do this. We read the first 5 verses, and we said love is not that easy. But I could push back a little bit and ask, or is it? Do you want to love better? It's not going to be produced by trying harder. It's going to be produced by walking with Jesus. Because you and I know that whenever you hang out with people, you start acting like those people sometimes, right? How many of you guys have noticed when you hang out with people, they have a certain phrase that they say, or they have a certain mannerism that they do, and you find yourself doing that thing? People rub off on you, right? And the same thing is true as we walk with Jesus. It doesn't just rub off on us. He is producing those things in our lives. Galatians 5 tells us that if we walk in the Spirit, there's a fruit that's produced. And does anyone remember the first characteristic of the fruit of the Spirit? It is love. So as we walk with Jesus, He produces this. To love better, we don't need to focus more on our spouses. To love better, we don't need to focus more on our children. To love better, we need to focus more on the correct object of our affection, and that is the person of Jesus Christ. The more time that we spend with Him, the more He will produce these things in us. Look at these truths that Paul wrote about in 1 Thessalonians. He said, "And the Lord make you to increase and abound in love." Right? He doesn't just tell you, hey, go love. He says, I will produce this in you. Look what he said in chapter 4. He says, but as touching brotherly love, you don't need that I write unto you, for you yourselves are taught of God to love one another. And this one is my favorite. Over in Ephesians 3, he says this. He said, this is why I pray for the church at Ephesus. My prayer is that Christ would dwell in your hearts by faith. My prayer is that you'd be rooted and grounded in love, that you would be able to comprehend with all saints what is the breadth and length and depth and height, and to know the love of your spouse. Is that what it says? To know the love of your parents or your children. No, to know the love of Christ that passes all knowledge. Because then you might be filled with all the fullness of God. The reason we struggle with love oftentimes is because we're focusing on these things. Oh, I got to be more patient. I got to be more kind. I can't envy. I can't vaunt myself. I got to do all these other things. And we're focusing on trying harder. And I'll tell you the truth, if it doesn't work for salvation, it's not going to work for sanctification. It's not going to make you more like Jesus by trying harder. It's going to make you more like Jesus by just walking with Him. Understanding how much He loves you and allowing Him to produce this in you. I haven't been hunting in a long time, and it is hunting, not hunting, all right? But I haven't been hunting in a while, but I've been bow hunting, and one of the things they teach you about bow hunting is that whenever you're going to shoot, if you have to do what? You've got to aim small. If you aim small, you miss small. I think they teach you that in firearms shooting as well, right? You've got to aim small. You can't just look at the target and go, all right, let's see what's going to happen, you know. You've got to aim and focus in on a small part of it. You have to know what you want to hit. You have to know where you're aiming. When we find ourselves in a relational crisis or with a desire to love others better, it's easy to aim at these things. But let's be honest. I had to fly through those because if I would have taken my time to explain every one of those, most of you would have checked out, right? I'd be over my time limit for this morning, right? But the reason we didn't take a whole lot of time and dive into these things is because these things are not produced by your effort. These things are produced by walking in the Spirit. So I'm not aiming at more patience. I'm not aiming at being more kind. I'm not aiming at all of those other things. I'm aiming at Jesus. I'm aiming to know Jesus. I'm aiming to know how much Jesus loves me. I want to make this very easy for us. Aim smaller. Look unto Jesus. The best thing you could do for your love life is to walk with Jesus, to learn to worship Him, to connect with others and worship Jesus with others, to serve others as an act of worship of Jesus. And as you do these things with a focus upon Christ, something supernatural happens. You start to love like Jesus. You love others as an act of worship to Jesus. This is counterintuitive to what many of us believe. Love is not the fruit that comes as a result of trying harder. It is fruit that comes as a result of loving Jesus. I'll finish with this statement. Jesus is the answer for eternity. And Jesus is the answer for love. Let's pray together.